Part 1. Origins and Prehistoric Greece. Before the marble temples and wise philosophers, Greece began with two very different civilizations. First came the Minoans on the island of Crete, around 2000 BCE. Think of them as the party hosts of the ancient Mediterranean, famous for their grand palaces, colorful frescoes, and a mysterious writing system we still haven't fully cracked. Their society thrived on trade, not war, making Crete a bustling hub of ships, exotic goods, and myths like the Minotaur. But on the mainland, a harder, more warrior-like people rose. The Mycenaeans, 1700 BCE. These were the folks who supposedly stormed Troy, led by names you've definitely heard: Achilles, Agamemnon, and Odysseus. Whether the Trojan War really happened is debated, but archaeology suggests there was a city of Troy that fell around that time. Let's just say Homer didn't invent everything. Then came the collapse. Around 1100 BCE, both the Minoans and Mycenaeans vanished from the historical stage. Palaces burned, writing disappeared, and Greece slipped into a shadowy era we now call the Greek Dark Ages. For centuries, no monumental architecture, no records, no epic poems, just small villages trying to survive. But this darkness would set the stage for a spectacular rebirth. Part 2. Birth of the City-States, Polis. Out of the ashes of the Dark Ages, something revolutionary emerged. The polis, or city-state. Imagine dozens of little independent mini-countries, each with its own laws, armies, and personalities. There wasn't one Greece yet. There were Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, and many others, each fiercely proud of their independence. What's fascinating is how different these city-states were. Sparta was essentially a military camp disguised as a city. From age 7, boys trained to be soldiers, while girls were raised to be tough and outspoken, a rarity in the ancient world. Meanwhile, Athens took a very different route. They flirted with monarchy and oligarchy before stumbling onto something brand new: democracy. It wasn't perfect. Only free male citizens could vote. But it was the seed of an idea that still shapes governments today. Despite their differences, the Greeks began to develop a shared identity. They spoke the same language, worshipped the same gods, and gathered for festivals like the Olympic Games. And although they loved to bicker and fight one another, when a bigger threat appeared on the horizon, they would soon discover the power of standing together. Part 3. The Archaic Period, 8500 BCE. By 800 BCE, Greece was waking up from its long sleep. This era, called the Archaic Period, was a time of experimentation, invention, and art. For starters, this is when the great epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, were written down. Whether or not Homer was a real person is still debated, but his tales of war, honor, and wandering heroes became the cultural DNA of Greece. At the same time, the first Olympic Games were held in 776 BCE. Imagine sweaty athletes, not in sleek modern sports gear, but completely naked, competing in running, wrestling, and chariot races to honor Zeus. Victors didn't get medals, just olive wreaths and eternal bragging rights. Politically, Athens started experimenting with reforms. Leaders like Solon and Cleisthenes planted the seeds of democracy by giving citizens more say in government. These were radical ideas in a world still dominated by kings and tyrants. Meanwhile, Greek art advanced from stiff, Egyptian-style statues to more lifelike, natural figures. Slowly but surely, Greece was becoming something unique, a civilization that valued both warriors and words. Part 4. The Persian Wars, 499–449 BCE. Then came the ultimate test. Persia. Picture the largest empire the world had ever seen, stretching from modern-day Turkey to India, now setting its sights on tiny, quarrelsome Greece. On paper, it should have been a slaughter. Instead, Greece delivered some of the most legendary battles in history. First, the Battle of Marathon, 490 BCE, where Athenian hoplites crushed a much larger Persian army. Legend says a messenger ran 26 miles to Athens to deliver the news, inspiring the modern marathon race. Then, the unforgettable Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BCE, 300 Spartans, plus a few thousand Greek allies, making a last stand against Xerxes' massive army. Spoiler, they lost, but their sacrifice became immortal. Finally, the tide turned at the Battle of Salamis, where the Greek navy outmaneuvered the Persians in a narrow strait, proving brains and oars could beat overwhelming numbers. By the end of the Persian Wars, Greece wasn't just safe, it was proud, united, and ready to soar. Athens, in particular, would emerge as the superstar of the Greek world. Part 5. The Golden Age of Athens, 5th century BCE. Fresh off their victory against Persia, Athens strutted onto the world stage like a rock star after a sold-out tour. Under the leadership of Pericles, the city blossomed into a cultural superpower. This was the era of the Parthenon, gleaming with marble columns dedicated to Athena, and the birth of ideas that would echo through history. Athens perfected its democracy, still limited, but revolutionary. Citizens debated in the assembly, voted on laws, and even decided who deserved exile by scratching names onto pottery shards. Imagine being kicked out of town because your neighbors didn't like your politics. Meanwhile, philosophy took center stage. Socrates roamed the streets, pestering people with endless questions. His student Plato built the academy, the world's first real university. Then came Aristotle, tutor to Alexander the Great, who wrote on everything from logic to biology, basically the human Google of his time. Theaters flourished too. Playwrights like Sophocles and Euripides staged tragedies that wrestled with fate and justice, while Aristophanes delivered biting comedies that roasted politicians. It was a time when art, thought, and civic pride all peaked at once. If Greece had ever been a shining star, this was the moment it burned brightest. Part 6. The Peloponnesian War, 431–404 BCE. But of course, stars that burn brightest often burn out fastest. Athens' rise didn't sit well with Sparta, and soon the two powerhouses clashed in the Peloponnesian War. This wasn't a quick, glorious conflict. It was a brutal 27-year grind that dragged all of Greece into chaos. Athens, with its mighty navy, squared off against Sparta's unbeatable army. The war swung back and forth, with betrayals, sieges, and even a devastating plague that killed a third of Athens' population, including Pericles himself. For a while it seemed Athens might still hold on, but their disastrous expedition to Sicily sealed their fate. In the end, Sparta triumphed in 404 BCE, forcing Athens to surrender. But victory didn't bring peace. Instead, Greece was left exhausted, divided, and vulnerable. Sparta's brief dominance soon crumbled, and other states scrambled for power. The Greek miracle of the Golden Age was over, replaced by bickering, instability, and the looming shadow of a northern neighbor few had taken seriously until now. Part 7. Rise of Macedonia and Alexander the Great. Enter Philip II of Macedon, a cunning king who saw Greece's weakness and pounced. One by one, he brought the squabbling city-states under his control, not by brute force alone, but also by clever diplomacy and the creation of a revolutionary new army formation, the Macedonian phalanx, bristling with 18-foot spears. Greece was united at last, but under Macedonian, not Athenian or Spartan, leadership. Then came his son, Alexander the Great, a name that still echoes like thunder. Tutored by Aristotle, Alexander combined brains with unmatched ambition. In just over a decade, he toppled the mighty Persian Empire, marched through Egypt, and pushed all the way to India. His empire stretched from Greece to the edge of the known world, an achievement unmatched in antiquity. But Alexander wasn't just about conquest. He spread Hellenistic culture, a fusion of Greek art, language, and ideas with local traditions. Cities named Alexandria popped up everywhere, becoming centers of trade, science, and learning. Though he died young at 32, Alexander's impact was seismic, reshaping the ancient world and leaving a legacy that lasted centuries. Part 8. Decline and Roman Conquest, 146 BCE. After Alexander's death, his empire shattered like a dropped vase. His generals carved it up into rival kingdoms, the Seleucids, Ptolemies, and others, each clinging to a piece of the glory. These Hellenistic kingdoms were rich and sophisticated, but also constantly fighting one another. The spirit of unity that had once electrified Greece was gone. Meanwhile, a new power was rising in the West: Rome. Patient, disciplined, and relentless, the Romans slowly expanded across the Mediterranean. By the 2nd century BCE, Greece was fractured and ripe for conquest. The decisive blow came in 146 BCE, when Rome crushed the city of Corinth, effectively bringing Greece under Roman control. Politically, Greece was finished, but culturally, not at all. Greek philosophy, art, and literature flooded into Rome, shaping Roman education, architecture, and even religion. As one Roman poet famously said, "Greece, though captured, took her captor captive." In other words, Greece may have lost its freedom, but its ideas conquered the conquerors, and, eventually, the world. That's it for this video. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.